right, so Mike and I said we were going to do this last week, and Liz and I are going to have some fun with it. We're going to pick one guy on every single playoff team who we want to win the cup, whether it's like an old guy, in my case, somebody I've like either worked with or know. The one exception is the Florida Panthers. They won last year. Too bad,
Ugh,
so sad. You're not a part of this.
don't care. Yeah.
Yeah, nobody cares about you.
Yeah, I looked through the roster because I was trying to do this, and I was like, there's no one on here. Most of them have a cup because they don't have a very different roster from last year. And then some of the guys they did bring in, either I don't care about enough or they already have cups. So it's like, all right, what are we going to do? But I have 15 other ones that I'm fired up about. I'll give my disclaimer first. My rule for myself was that everyone had to have an age that started with a 3. So I have a lot of players that I really like on a lot of these teams who are younger and whatnot, but I'm like, I'm going to go with like guys who are like, not that this is their last shot by any means, because some of these guys are still huge impact players for their teams, but like more the guys who have been in the show for a little while now, and I'd love to see them get some hardware this year.
I have like one guy who's under 30 and then like a couple of people that I've actually like worked with.
Mm-hmm.
Which like obviously there's an inherent cheering happening there.
Of course.
And so honestly, thank God Vancouver's not in the playoffs because like the answer there would be like Elias Pettersson, Brock Besser, and nobody else. Zero other people. Like all right, let's go. Do you want to do the West or the East first?
Let's go with the East just because we'll already knock Florida off out of there, and then we'll go through the rest of them.
All right, so let's start with Tampa then, because that's who they're playing.
Okay, my answer for Tampa is Cam Atkinson. That's a guy that I have some kind things to say about him. Like, I think he seems like a really great guy, and he's, been through the ringer with some injury stuff and whatnot. It'd be nice to see him get a chip under his belt. He's been a huge part of some leadership groups with some teams in the past, so I think it'd be nice for him.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. With Cam Atkinson, he's gone through waivers a couple times this year. He dealt with a whack ton of stuff in both Columbus and Philadelphia. I think that he's just somebody that seems like the consummate professional. And talking to people in hockey, like I know people who have been his teammate who say like he's just such a great human being. The other guy on Tampa Bay, I will say, is Brandon Hagel, and that's simply because that man was a menace at the Four Nations, and I think he deserves to be rewarded for his menacing behavior on behalf of Canada.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I got a buddy who's got some money on a Brandon Hagel Conn Smythe, and hey, if he cashes in some 5-figure payout there, I'll be pretty impressed.
Mike?
Yeah,
Yes!
of course.
We love Mike Partner on this show. That man is wild. Okay, let's go to the other Atlantic Division series. I'm gonna get this out of the way. I want the Toronto Maple Leafs to win the Stanley Cup. All of them, every single one.
Oh, see, this one was actually kind of hard for me, and then I picked Scott Laughton immediately because I was like, you know what? I really like Scott Laughton. I feel like anyone who exists on like online circles and whatnot knows that like he's just a really likable fella, and he's been a really good activist for a lot of different causes in the community and stuff like that. And he's a guy I'd love to see win a cup. I am big fan of Scott Laughton, and he's a guy who was a trade deadline acquisition, big chip, and didn't really work out for the Leafs for the first little bit, but it looks like he's going to start to cook. So hopefully, if they're going to win, that'd be a guy I'd be happy to see take that one home.
Yeah, you know what? I agree there. Like Scott Lawton's work off the ice, it straight up makes him a really good human being. And I think on this show as a whole, we cheer for good human beings. We
Exactly.
just talked about Cam Atkinson, and Scott Lawton certainly fits that bill. On the Ottawa Senators, who you got?
It's got to be Claude Giroux. I feel like that's the answer, right? Like that's well, what a beauty of a guy, and I'd love to see him win a cup. Obviously, like with everybody else on this list that we've said and will say.
Yeah, like I mean, the guy is from Ontario, and Hearst, I believe, is closer to Ottawa than it is to Toronto, and he's
My
wanted to play in
geography's not up to
Ottawa.
snuff.
Yeah, and I think when you look at it, like once again, Claude Giroux, pretty close to being a Hall of Fame type of player. He's been really close to a couple Olympic teams, and when you're in the hunt for the Canadian Olympic team, you're a good hockey player. Like you're a star at that point. and they got really close. That was, I believe, the Patrick Kane Stanley Cup winning goal was scored against the Flyers. That was like super weird, but
2010.
yeah, so that would have been Claude Giroux's like rookie year or whatever.
Probably. God.
Uh, I like Claude Giroux. I mean, his kiddos are so cute. His wife's adorable. Like that whole family situation. And there's something to be said for winning near your hometown. I think that there's just an added thing to that, and I'd really love to see him win. And the other guy, I will say, he's a bit of a younger guy, but the German in me can't ignore it. I'd love to see Tim Stützle win the Stanley Cup, especially with how close Draisaitl got last year. I'd love to see the Stanley Cup go to Germany. I think that as a nation, obviously we're a soccer nation, but sneaky kind of investing in hockey, and I think a German bringing the Stanley Cup there would do wonders in terms of driving interest for the grassroots level, and so I think that could just have a positive impact on hockey as a whole.
100%. Yeah, I agree.
All right, let's go to the Carolina Hurricanes.
Yeah, same thing. I picked a couple of guys who have been on some really competitive teams in the past, but never have managed to lock up the Stanley Cup, and Brent Burns and Freddie Anderson, two guys who are just phenomenal hockey players, and Brent Burns especially, maybe not at his peak form as he once was, but that's a guy who, part of the reason why the California Gauntlet was a thing and why, San Jose Sharks are hard to play against. Like, Brent Burns is a legend, and I'd love to see him, hoisting a cup. I think it'd be a pretty great photo to see, and we know Freddie Anderson has had some struggles as well, and I'd love to see him win a cup. So if Carolina were to make it all the way, those are the two guys I'd be super happy for. And then if we're sneaking into the maybe not so old guys category here, got to give a shout out to my hometown boys, Seth Jarvis and Jordan Martinook. I'd love to see those guys bring one back to Winnipeg as well.
Oh, we love Seth. I'm gonna go with the guy that I worked with, and the guy that's just been super kind to me for a very long time, Taylor Hall. Between injuries and trades and his agent being a complete dumbass, he's had a lot of ups and downs, and he's really found his spot in Carolina, and I would absolutely love to see him win. The other thing I'm going to say about the Carolina Hurricanes is I'd love to see Eric Tulsky win the Stanley Cup as a general manager.
I agree.
Because, oh my goodness, would that upset the apple cart of we'll call it the hockey men. There was a great piece by James Myrtle in The Athletic detailing the Carolina Hurricanes front office and how it has people with like PhDs in neuroscience and nanotechnology, and it just goes to show that you need to think outside the box. And I think that Eric Tulsky winning a Stanley Cup as the architect of the Carolina Hurricanes would do wonders and open doors. And it would kind of force people in the NHL to realize that they need to think outside of just like their 200 friends, and try and find somebody who is sort of best suited for the role, and it might not be because they have hockey knowledge.
Yeah, I think the Carolina Hurricanes are the most interesting organization in the entire NHL. I'm fascinated by a lot of their ownership and decision making, so I totally agree with you on Eric Tulsky there.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, New Jersey, their opponent. Who you got?
I'm going to go with Brendan Dillon. Again, another guy with a Winnipeg connection here. He spent a couple seasons here in Winnipeg, and nothing but good things to say about the guy. Everyone who has ever spent any amount of time with him only has glowing reviews about the guy, and, he was super heartfelt in his return to Winnipeg, and so many good things to say about him. Also a really good defenseman, really good hockey player, and would love to see him also bring a cup home.
Yeah, I mean, that's super fair. Outside of the guys that I obviously worked with, Nico and Jesper, who, I mean, I would absolutely, I would love to see them win. Sheldon Keefe is the guy. I think he took a lot of flack in Toronto for things that were not necessarily his fault. And I mean, given the injuries that he dealt with, like Nico Hischier missed time this year, Jack Hughes is obviously out. Now they're missing 3 of their top 4 defensemen. I would love to see Sheldon Keefe win a Stanley Cup. Maybe not in New Jersey, obviously, but one day I would absolutely love to see Sheldon win a cup. And I think New Jersey's in deep trouble now that they're playing without Siegenthaler, Dillon, and Luke Hughes.
100%.
All right, let's go Washington.
Washington, there's a ton. I'm gonna start with again. I'm sorry to keep doing this, but Dylan McIlrath is a guy who has been bouncing back and forth between the NHL and the AHL for most of his career, and isn't playing overly meaningful minutes with the Washington Capitals by any means, but is a guy I'd love to see have his name etched on the Stanley Cup. Winnipeg guy, and another kind of off the board pick is Nick Dowd. Nick Dowd is from Alabama, and I
That's
think
my
bringing
guy.
the Stanley Cup to the state of Alabama would be really, really interesting. The guys from Huntsville, and I think that I love it when players who are born and bred in unconventional markets can succeed in the NHL. That is what I live for. So I would love to see that. And then I also got to give a shout out to my favorite hockey player in the whole wide world, my boy Pierre-Luc Dubois. I'd love to see him win a cup. It'd be hilarious if amid all this that the Washington Capitals are the team to win and get a cup out of the Patrick Laine Pierre-Luc Dubois sweepstakes of 2021. But those are kind of the three guys there. I am rooting for Washington to come out of the East there. Not that I think they're going to, but there's a lot of guys I really like on that group.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the guys that I want to win have already kind of won, like Logan Thompson.
Exactly.
Obviously, Ovi.
Yeah.
It was super cool. But Nick Dowd was my guy as well. For all the reasons that you stated, I also think him and Nick Waugh in Vegas are the best fourth line centers in the NHL. I don't think they can play third line center, but I don't think you're going to find a better fourth line center. Like, they do everything you want them to do. And they're just consummate professionals. The other guy I would absolutely love to see win a Stanley Cup is Andrew Mangiapane.
Yeah.
He's small. He's been doubted his entire career, going back to the OHL. And he's just kind of somebody who's plodded along and found a way. And whether he was on the top line in Calgary, now he's on the third line in Washington. He's just kind of been one of those guys that's found a way to get it done, and I really admire him. So I'm going to go with Andrew Mangiapane. All right, Montreal, as if they don't have enough Stanley Cups as a franchise.
This one was hard for me, especially because in my head I was going with this like over 30 rule or whatever, and I was like, Mike Matheson seems like a great guy. Beyond that, I'm not overly inspired by the Montreal Canadiens, and there's no one in that group that I'm like dying to see win a cup other than my boy Patrick Laine, but his time will come, and I'm not concerned. So I'm gonna go with Mike Matheson for my over 30 pick. I really liked him when he was in Pittsburgh, and like, you know, he seems like an interesting guy. I love listening to Montreal media speak about him and kind of the different aspects of his game and the different situations in which he excels, and then other situations where he can get totally exposed, which is, you know, he's a fun player to talk about that's not fun in the same conventional ways that some of the All-Stars are and whatnot. So I've always kind of enjoyed Mike Matheson, and I'd like to see him win a cup. That'd be nice.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Brendan Gallagher. And I'm only going. Let's put it this way: I'm only going with Brendan Gallagher because Carey Price doesn't count. Carey Price would unequivocally be my answer.
Oh my God, yeah.
If he were an option, but Brendan Gallagher lost his mother to brain cancer very recently. There was a story about the lady giving the last jersey from
Yeah.
Hockey Fights Cancer Night because those jerseys aren't allowed anymore. Thank you to the Stahl brothers and Ivan Provorov for that. I hope you step on Legos. But, I mean, I look at it, and anytime you lose a parent and you continue to play hockey or you continue to live as a human being and perform at high levels is commendable. Brendan Gallagher has been taken an absolute beating for the Montreal Canadiens for years now. He's played on everything from the first line to the fourth line. He's really kind of found his way. It sounds like he's really mentoring guys like Slavkovsky and Lane Hudson and Cole Caulfield and Arbor Jacki, taking them under his wing, making them feel welcome. Patrick Laine, the same thing. And he's dealt with a lot of crap in his career, and I'd love to see Brendan Gallagher have success. So I'm going to go with him. And that finishes off the East. Let's go with the West. Liz, who on the Winnipeg Jets do you want to win the Stanley Cup?
Same thing goes for you, like you said with Toronto. Especially getting to know some of the guys a little bit, kind of casually over the last little bit, and getting a closer look at the team in these past few years and months. The answer is all of them for sure. Like I would love to see them all succeed, and more than anything, I'd love to see it for the city of Winnipeg. And some of the core pieces like Connor Hellebuck is obviously kind of like the easy answer there, just because that is a Hall of Fame goaltender if I've ever seen one play in my life. But I think you need a little bit of that Lord Stanley hardware to kind of solidify your case. And if he gets his third Vezina this season, obviously that's a pretty compelling case, but I think a Stanley Cup would go a long way for him. But my kind of off the board pick is going to be Dylan DeMello. Dylan's an awesome guy and has been such a big part of this team for the last couple of years. To this day, depending on how this Gabe Velarde upcoming deal works out and what his career looks like, I'm still going to say that the Dylan DeMello trade is the best trade of Kevin Cheveldayoff's tenure. That's a guy that was brought in just before the pandemic, and listen, like, unspeakably good things to say about his performance on the ice and how he's stepped up into that 1B role and turned Josh Morrissey. Obviously, Josh has been the biggest part of his own growth, but that pairing has become a legitimate top pairing for an NHL team and a cup contender, which is just unbelievable. And Dylan's just an awesome guy. So that's who I'd like to see get a cup here on the Jets.
Speaking of that defensive pairing, my guy is Josh Morrissey. I adore everything about how that man plays hockey, how he handles himself, how he's open about his mental health. He's just a shining example of not only a really good defenseman, but a quality human being. And so, I mean, my two favorite Winnipeg Jets players are Josh Morrissey and Nikolai Ehlers. I'd love to see the cup go back to Denmark. I think that'd be really cool. But I think for everything that Josh Morrissey does and the season that he's had, there was a point where people were talking about his contract being terrible, and now it's very clearly one of the best contracts for a defenseman in the league. And I think he is one of the more underrated defensemen in the sense that, like, he doesn't get talked about the same way. Like, okay, Cale Makar and Quinn Hughes are kind of by themselves, but like he absolutely has to be in the discussion with guys like Victor Hedman and Roman Josi and Jacob Slavin and those kind of that sort of cluster of defensemen. Josh Morrissey is very much in that sort of next echelon of defensemen in the National Hockey League, and for everything that he does off the ice, I'd love to see him get rewarded with a Stanley Cup.
Yeah, Josh is an awesome guy, and I mean, if you want to talk about, like, where is he going to go with this? Guys who I've never seen a player jump from the conversation of being one of the worst contracts in the entire NHL to one of the best in such a short amount of time. The resurgence of this guy is unbelievably incredible, and if we're talking the same conversation about the Brendan Gallagher conversation, he also lost a parent very recently and has just been, nothing but solid and kind and an exemplary example of how you should treat people as a cornerstone player of an NHL franchise in a hockey market. Great guy, nothing but good things to say about him, so I totally echo that pick as well.
All right, let's go to the Dallas-Colorado series, starting with Dallas.
We're just skipping right over St. Louis, hey? I'm on board. We can.
We're gonna skip over
Cam Fowler would be fine.
Cam Fowler.
Okay.
All right,
good for him.
Cool.
Moving on.
Yeah. I mean, let's be honest here. Like, I don't think St. Louis. So we had to pick one upset for the entire first round, and I picked the Blues just because they were coming in super hot, and Connor Hellebuck has struggled in the playoffs. It kind of made a lot of sense to me. Like, okay, if there's gonna be an upset, I think that one or Minnesota getting Kaprizov and Ek back would be it. I mean, yeah, sure, anything can happen, but it's really hard to see St. Louis coming back with how the Jets are kind of playing and really stifling them. But yeah, I'd love to see Cam Fowler win a Stanley Cup. That guy was in Anaheim for...
And hasn't played a play in the NHL playoffs in 10 years because of playing with the Anaheim Ducks, right? It's a guy who, 100%.
It's a tough one. So, all right, let's go, Dallas.
Dallas, I'm going to go with Matt Duchene. That's a guy who has had a really interesting career, had some injury stuff, had some teams where he's bounced around and been horrible, but then other teams where he's been awesome, and he's just a really fascinating player. And listen, I don't know the guy or anything, but seems like a nice enough guy and whatever you could say off the ice, but he's played such a massive role on this incredible Dallas Stars forward group. And I think that it's so cool that he's kind of carved out a role for himself on this in this group and become such an instrumental part of that offense. And I'd love to see him win a cup. That'd be awesome. I like a lot of the guys in the Stars, but in terms of some of their older players, Matt Duchene is definitely the one that kind of stuck out for me on that roster.
Yeah, I mean, Duchesne is always really thoughtful in his interviews, and that makes a lot of sense. Like, I'm certainly cheering for him. Um, Cody Cece is the guy I'm going to go with here. And the reason I'm going to do this is because when he played in Ottawa and Toronto, this guy got raked over the coals 6 ways to Sunday. And, like, it was bad. And let's face it, he was not very good in Toronto. But then he went to Edmonton, and, like, they went to the Cup final. And now he's in Dallas, and they're a really good team. Like, if Cody Cece's in your top four, yeah, you're in some trouble. But if he's your six, that's a really good six. Like, that is a quality defenseman. Really nice. Like, I know the family because I coached his brother at school. But Cody's, like, he's, again, like, similar to Duchesne, thoughtful in his interviews. He takes a lot of flack and shows up to do media. Like, just kind of goes out of his way. He's involved. I know he's involved in a ton of charitable work, too. And I really do think that matters in terms of, like, how good of a human being you are. And so with Cody Cece kind of bouncing around, taking a ton of flack, I think it'd be really cool to see him win a Stanley Cup for all of the nonsense that he's dealt with. Some deserved, some undeserved. I'd love to see that. All right, let's go Colorado.
Colorado, I have a couple of random, sort of more off the board picks. I'm gonna go with Charlie Coyle as one of them. I actually really like Charlie Coyle as a player. I think he's kind of fun, and I like the testament of what he is in terms of Colorado's decision making this year and how they turned what was an AHL level roster at the beginning of the season, specifically in their forward group, to one of, if not the most dangerous team in the entire Western Conference. Like, applaud Jared Bednar and I applaud Joe Sakic for a really, really interesting past couple of months. And Charlie Coyle, I like the way he plays, and he's starting to play a bigger and more impactful in a positive way role with the Colorado Avalanche, even though it wasn't at the beginning. Kind of similar vibes to what I was saying before about Scott Laughton, where it was like immediately I was like, oh, was this the right trade? But it's like there's definitely still some smoke there, so it'll be interesting to see. And I'm going to give a shout out to Scott Wedgwood. I would love to see Scott Wedgwood get his name on a Stanley Cup if he would end up playing any games, or if that's, I don't know how it works with the backup goaltenders if they don't play in terms of who gets their names engraved on that cup. But Scott Wedgwood was the goalie for the Canadian World Junior team the first year I got really, really locked in on World Juniors, and I've always thought highly of him because of kind of what he represents to me. And again, also seems like a really funny guy. Seems nice. And so, yeah, it's kind of my off the board pick. Again, it's a little bit harder with some of these teams who have won in the last couple of years because, a lot of the guys, obviously Gabe Landeskog would be up there for so many folks and whatnot, but he's got a cup, so, it doesn't really fit the bill there. So I'm going to go with Charlie Coyle and Scott Wedgwood.
I'm going to go with Jonathan Drouin. And I'm going to do that because he came in as, like, a really high pick. They got traded to, like, Montreal, his home team, basically. And everybody really wanted it to go well, and it didn't go well. And then he kind of, like, fell off the map and just really bounced around, had to sign, like, a PTO in Colorado. It's really worked out for him. He's playing with one of his best friends, and Nathan McKinnon, and he's kind of one of those guys that has become really easy to root for. And, like, he's taken his leave of absence, and he's done a ton to kind of better himself, and not only just, like, mentally, because he spoke about how difficult, like, bouncing around was and the mental toll that it took on him, but I like to see guys have that type of success. And in Colorado, he's really kind of found his little, like, spot in the lineup, and he looks really good. And like you said, like, guys like McKinnon and Makar and Landeskog have all won already. And so I would love to see Jonathan Drouin win a Stanley Cup with Colorado. All right, let's go to Vegas, who didn't misuse LTIR this year. Congratulations to them.
Yeah, Vegas was another hard one because a lot of that roster is guys who have won cups. So I'm gonna go with a super easily my most off the board pick here. I'm gonna go with my boy Bobby Hogg, Robert Hagg. Robert Hagg is a guy who's also received a ton of flack in however long, and I put him into the Cody Cece camp of probably rightfully so because Robert Hagg has not been an all-star NHL defenseman exactly if we're gonna go with that. But he's a guy that I don't know. I've always kind of maybe rooted for in that weird way where it's like I almost felt bad for him because of how hard everyone was on him when he was playing in like Buffalo and different places like that. So I didn't really know who to pick here, so I was like, you know what, I've always had such a soft spot for Robert Hagg, so I'm gonna go with him.
I like it. I'm gonna go with Teenage Mutant Ninja Hurdle. I just ever since he scored the between the legs goal in his rookie season, I've loved watching this guy. And as a kid, it was too late for me to stay up and watch him. But I've loved tracking his career past that, and playing in San Jose. Through like the good years, but then through the really, really thin years. I love to see a guy like that get a chance. He looks reinvigorated in Vegas after his knee injury. And he's just kind of one of those guys that like always has a smile on his face, isn't causing any trouble. Like there's no nonsense associated with him. And he's a hell of a hockey player. So I would love to see him win. Let's go to Minnesota.
Minnesota, I think a decently easy pick for a lot of folks would be Matt Zuccarello, another guy who's like I feel like considering the market that he's played in for a good chunk of his career, pretty not spoken about, not really making headlines, but a really, really solid high-end NHL player that I've really liked his game for much of his year, especially spending so much time in the Central Division here. I've watched a lot of Matt Zuccarello hockey over the last few years, and I'd love to see him win. And another kind of random's the wrong word, but another country to bring the cup back to that's not as represented in modern NHL, circles and whatnot, like the Canada and the US and some of the Scandinavian countries are. So I'd love to see Matt Zuccarello win a Stanley Cup if Minnesota were to make a push.
I'm going way off the board here, and I'm going with two guys that I've worked with. John Hines and Jason King. the head coach and the guy that coaches the power play. I mean, two of my favorite people in hockey. John was a major reason why I got hired in New Jersey, and like kept in touch. Just a really, really good human being, and took a lot of flack in New Jersey. And I thought unnecessarily that roster was not good, and so I would absolutely love to see him win. And then Jason King is one of the only people I worked with in Vancouver that I liked. And him, Bruce, Clarkey, maybe like two other people. But like Jason's ideas for a power play are so out of the box that like I've heard coaches be like, okay, whoa, like what are we doing here? And the fact that John, and only because I know what these ideas were and what he wasn't allowed to do, John has let him do it, and it has resulted in the Kirill Kaprizov, Eriksson Ek, Matt Boldy, Marco Rossi breakout situation. And so I love to see people who believe in each other succeed, and Jason was really good to me, teaching me different things about power play concepts, and I'd love to see him rewarded for his sort of really forward, kind of outside the box thinking. So those are my guys in Minnesota. All right, last series. Let's go with the Edmonton Oilers.
If anyone knows me, they know that I just simply don't wish the Edmonton Oilers well in any capacity, but let's go with a non-Edmonton Oiler in Jeff Skinner. That's a guy who I feel like it's pretty easy to root for, whether it's the individual goal songs or the fact that, there are fully functioning human beings who have lived long childhoods, who have many more memories than have happened in the time that Jeff Skinner has played in the NHL and not made the playoffs. Like, holy smokes, it's been a rough go for that guy, and anyone who's a career Buffalo Sabre, I do have
Prayers
leaps
up.
and bounds of prayers up to give for them, whatever. So yeah, Jeff Skinner is easy enough to root for, and again, another guy who kind of was a weird fit in the Edmonton Oilers lineup at first, but I definitely think that there's some juice there, and we've seen the juice a little bit. So if anyone on that team has to win a cup, I guess I'd be happy it's him. I don't really care about the rest of them. I don't really wish the rest of any of them well. But go Jeff Skinner, I guess. Woo.
Yeah, Jeff Skinner is like the easiest guy in the entirety of the playoffs to root for at this point, because this is his first playoff game and he's like in his mid-30s. I am gonna go with the very obvious, given where I'm from, and that would be Connor McDavid. Not only do I want Connor to win because I want Connor to win, I think the one thing people in hockey can agree on is if we want our sport to grow, our best players need to win.
Yeah.
And Connor McDavid winning the Stanley Cup would be objectively good for the growth of the game. So I would like to see him win the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, I mean, that's always my my thing with the Edmonton Oilers. Like last year, obviously they were so close, and it was like, I know every year we go through the motions in the offseason of people trying to be a little bit more like the Stanley Cup champs, where it's like when Vegas wins, it's like maybe we don't need goalies anymore. And then when Florida wins, it's like, oh, like maybe we need everyone needs a Matthew Tkachuk. Right, no, it's like, oh my gosh. And my one thing is that, like, if the Edmonton Oilers win a Stanley Cup, if they had won it last year, and even more so if they are to win it this year, it would be really cool to see the league overcorrect in the sense of I've never seen a more flawed team that is so unbelievably competitive, because if you just get good players, you can hang. And that's the one part that's really easy to root for when it comes to Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. It's like you can pick apart so many different components of that roster, but at the end of the day, if you have the two best players in the entire NHL on your team, like, you can make things work. And I feel like if we leaned more into that talent, it would be better for hockey across the board. So that's always my silver lining with the Edmonton Oilers.
Agreed. All right, let's go to the Kings.
Gotta give a shout out to my French Canadian king, Philippe Danault. I would love to see that guy win a cup again. Another guy who's not the flashiest by any means, bit of a human eraser in terms of what his contribution is to any team he's ever been on. And I love watching the LA Kings play. I'm kind of obsessed with the LA Kings. I think they're so much fun, and I have been really interested in watching them play hockey. If you're someone like me who likes to watch hockey outside of the markets that they have skin in the game in, because they want to learn about like hockey structure and different things and different units, all that, the LA Kings are an awesome team to watch because they play such structured hockey and they have great details and they are really, really fun to watch. So I love the Kings, and Phil Deneau is a big part of that. I love the way they kind of construct his line around him, and you know, a lot of the guys, well, some of the bigger guys in that roster do have cups, like, you know, guys like Andrei Kopitar and stuff like that. So Phil Deneau is the one that kind of sticks out for me.
All right, I'm going off the board here, and I'm going with a young kid. I'm going with Quinton Byfield. And the reason I'm going with Quinton Byfield is because he played hockey with my brother growing up. And we talk about good human beings. This is a kid that growing up would go to other people's houses and, like, you know how young boys can be. They can be super goddamn annoying, right? This kid would come up and put everyone's dishes in the dishwasher so that he didn't leave a mess in someone else's house. This is the type of human being we're talking about here. And so he is so easy to root for. Whenever he's at home, he goes on the ice with the kids. This will stay with me forever. There is one of the outdoor rinks that's kind of like community run, and it's strictly for pond hockey. Both Byfield and McDavid were home for Christmas a couple of years ago, and it was just as we were coming out of COVID, and they decided one night, without like telling anybody, that they were going to show up and just like play pond hockey like with the kids, and the kids were crazy excited, and nobody wanted to stop playing, and finally it got like super late, and traditionally like you're supposed to shovel off the rink when you're done, so that like it can be flooded and used the next day. But these kids like were staying out so late, their parents just like pulled them off the ice, and like no one was gonna shovel. And doesn't Quinton Byfield pick up a shovel and shovel the rink with Connor McDavid? Like, we're talking about two dudes in the National Hockey League shoveling off their local rink because the kids were so excited to play for them. So it's things like that where not only have I known Q since he was like 5 years old, he's just a really good dude, and I'd love to see him win. People were doubting him in like the first couple years of his career, and now it's like super clear that he is going to be one of the best power forwards in the entire league for the next like 10 years. And so I'd love to see that kind of percolate and happen. So those are the guys we want to win the Stanley Cup.